Tessa Boyd counted the deposit in ones and fives on the diner counter. $2,570. Tips saved for 14 months, folded flat, held together with a rubber band gone soft. And the leasing manager slid it back across the counter without touching it. Didn't count it. Didn't need to. Tessa did not argue. She just restacked the bills, slow and even, so her son at the far booth wouldn't see her hands shake. 9 days later, there was a notice taped to the door of Unit 4B. And the woman who taped it, Dana Voss of Crestline Residential, said it plain, in a leasing office with 6 people waiting and listening. The system doesn't lease to maybes, Miss Boyd. No husband, no history, no home. Then, the line cook. The one who plates every order in silence and is always the last to leave. Eli Ward. He set her coffee down in front of her. 2 sugars, no cream. The way she never has to ask. And he said 4 words about the lease. I'm going to cut before the words. You'll get them. I promise you'll get them. If you believe love is built with 2 pairs of hands, this story is for you. Before we go on, if you're the kind of person who thinks a home is something you build and not something you're granted, subscribe and stay with me. And do one thing. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Go on, I'll wait. Now, let me take you back. Delford, Ohio. You won't find it on the big maps. It's the kind of town where the water tower still has the high school's year painted on it, and the paint's peeling off the last number. There's a diner off the county road called the Blue Kettle. Blue vinyl booths gone gray at the seams. A pie case that hums. A bell over the door that some nights is the only thing that talks. Tessa worked the floor there, 31 years old. She worked doubles most weeks, and on the good weeks, she worked more. Open to close, then close to open, and the tips went into a coffee can in a cabinet above the sink at the motel. She had a smile she put on with her apron and took off in the parking lot when nobody was looking. Her credit sat in the low 540s. She knew the exact number. You learn your number when it's the thing standing between you and a door. There was an X somewhere, long gone so long, the boy barely asked anymore. And there was no lease in her name. Not one. Never had been. She'd always been on somebody else's paper. A boyfriend's. Her mother's. Before her mother passed. Her own name had never once been printed at the top of a rental agreement. They call that a thin file. A person who has paid rent for a decade and has nothing to show a computer for it. Thin file. Like she was made of paper herself. And there was Micah. 6 years old. All knees and questions. He slept on a fold-out couch in a motel that charged by the week, in a room that smelled like other people's cigarettes and the cleaner they used to cover it. The fold-out had a bar that ran right under the middle of his back, and Tessa had learned to fold a spare blanket in 3 and lay it over the bar so he wouldn't feel it. Every night. 3 folds. Lay it flat. Then she'd read to him. The same page. Every single night. It was a picture book about a bear who couldn't find his way home in the snow. And on the last page, the bear finds his den and the little light is on inside. Micah liked the ending. He liked knowing the light was on. So Tessa read it. And some nights he'd fall asleep 2 pages before the end. And she'd read the last page anyway. Out loud. Quiet, to the dark. Just so it got said. She was good at her job. Better than the job needed her to be. She'd come in early, and she'd stay late. And here's a thing she did that nobody asked her to do. She cleaned Eli's line. The cook station. Not her job. Not even close. But the last hour of a double, when the floor was dead and the cook was breaking down the grill, she'd wipe the steel down beside him, scrape the flat top, square the pans. She never said much doing it. Neither did he. They just worked the same 6 feet of kitchen like 2 people who'd agreed, without a word, that a clean station was worth the trouble. That was Eli Ward, 38, quiet in a way that wasn't shy. It was more like he decided at some point that words cost something and he wasn't going to spend more than he had. He was always the last to leave. He'd stay to seal the walk-in and hang his apron on the third hook, always the third, and turn off the lights in an order he never changed. He had a laminated something in his wallet. You'd catch the edge of it when he paid for his own coffee, which he insisted on doing, every shift, like a man who didn't want to owe the register a dime. A little rectangle, sealed in plastic, soft at the corners from being carried. He never showed it. Nobody ever asked. Some things you learn not to reach for. Once Micah asked him how old he was. Kids do that. Eli was scraping the flat top, and he didn't stop, and he said, "Old enough." That was all. And a minute later, and I want you to hold on to this, because it won't mean anything yet, and then one day it'll mean everything. Eli took a pencil from behind his ear and made a small mark on the doorframe of the kitchen. A little line, at about the height of a child, right at the top of Micah's head if the boy had stood under it. He did it without looking, the way you scratch an itch. An old habit. Nobody noticed. I noticed. Now you have too. Tessa noticed Eli, if I'm honest. Not the way the word wants you to hear it. She noticed him the way you notice a load-bearing wall. You don't think about it. You just know the roof is up because it's there. Now, the unit. Crestline Residential ran a block of townhomes on the north edge of Delford. Beige siding, little concrete stoops, a strip of grass out front the size of a bath towel. Unit 4B was on the end. 2 bedrooms, $1,285 a month. Which, if you've never had to do the math on your feet at 2 in the morning, is affordable. It's the kind of number a woman working doubles can almost make work. Almost. Tessa walked through it once, on a viewing. There was a bedroom with a window that faced east. She stood in that room and she thought, Micah could wake up with the sun on the wall. Not a parking lot light. The sun. She thought about where the fold-out could go, and then she thought, no, not the fold-out. A bed. A real bed with legs. She let herself think it for exactly as long as it took to walk back to the front door. And then she folded the thought up small and put it away, the way she folded everything. She applied that afternoon. Dana Voss handled the application. Voss wore a lanyard, like a badge of office, and had a way of talking to you while looking at her screen. So you were always addressing the side of her face. She had the requirements printed on a laminated card, and she read them off like a woman reading a sentence to a defendant. Deposit. $2,570. First month up front. And then, a cosigner earning 3 times the rent. Or, and here Voss looked up, finally, to deliver it. A 2-income married household with verifiable history. You understand, Voss said, we can't lease to a single applicant with a file like this. There's nothing to hold on to. She said it like the file was Tessa's fault. Like a thin file was a thing you did instead of a thing that happened to you. Tessa said she had the deposit. Right now. Cash. And Voss said the thing I told you at the start. About maybes. About no husband, no history, no home. But that came later, on the worst day. That first day she just smiled the smile that isn't one, and said the requirements weren't hers to bend. So Tessa went looking. And I want you to see this part, because this is the part everybody who's ever been poor knows in their teeth. She went to the Hartley Court Apartments. They wanted a cosigner, 3 times the rent. She went to the man renting the duplex on Ash Street, and he was kind about it. And he still wanted first, last, and a credit score that started with a 6. She went to a landlord out on Route 9 who ran 4 houses and had a sign in his truck window, and he took one look at the low 540s and said, nothing personal. It's always nothing personal. It's the most personal thing in the world, said by people who get to go home to a door that's theirs. Every door. The same door, really, wearing a different address. Show me a husband. Show me a history. Show me a number you don't have. And behind each of those doors was the same room she couldn't rent, the same east-facing window she couldn't give her son. And the clock. The motel had gone from weekly to a note under the door. New management, new rates, and a date. 9 days. Vacate in 9 days, or the rate goes up past anything a coffee can could hold. 9 days to produce a marriage she didn't have, and a history the system had never let her build. Micah felt it the way kids feel weather they can't name. He got quiet. He stopped asking about the bear book and just pointed at the last page. And one afternoon at the diner, in the dead hour, he was playing under a booth with the little junk he collected. Bottle caps. Mostly, he loved bottle caps, the red ones best. And he pressed a red one onto a cheap keyring he'd found. Snapped it on there good. Tessa asked him what it was for. For when we have a door, he said. Not if. When, he said it the way you'd say something you'd already decided was true. So we have a key ready. She had to go into the walk-in for a minute after that. It was cold in there. That's the reason she'd have given, if anyone had asked why her eyes were wet. It's cold in the walk-in. Eli was on the line. He'd have heard it. He heard most things. He didn't say anything then. The worst day came on a Thursday. Tessa had gone back to Crestline. She'd had an idea, a foolish, drowning person's idea, that if she brought the whole deposit in cash and laid it down, all of it, that the sight of real money on the counter would move something. That a person, faced with a mother and $2,570 real dollars, would find a way. People do that in stories. She still believed a little in stories. The leasing office was full. 6 people in the plastic chairs, all of them there to be told the same no in different words. And Tessa laid the money on the counter and counted it out. 1s and 5s mostly, tips are 1s and 5s. She counted it out loud. Soft. So it was clear it was all there. And Voss slid it back. Didn't touch it. Slid it back with the eraser end of a pencil, like it might be sticky. I've explained the requirements, Voss said. And then, loud enough for the plastic chairs, loud enough for 6 strangers to carry it out into the town, the system doesn't lease to maybes, Miss Boyd. No husband. No history. No home. 6 people looked at their shoes. That's the mercy strangers can give you. They look at their shoes. Tessa restacked the bills. Slow, even, she squared the edges twice. And she picked up her son's hand. Micah was there. Right there. And he'd heard it, and he was looking up at her to see how she was going to hold it, and she walked out with her back straight and her chin level, and she did not let one thing fall out of her face until she was in the truck with the door shut. That's dignity. Not the not hurting. The holding. She drove to the Blue Kettle because it was the only place she had left to be. Micah went to his booth with his bottle caps and his book. Tessa tied on her apron in the back and stood at the sink for a minute with the water running over her wrists. Eli was on the line. He'd have heard about the day the way he heard everything, sideways, from the set of her shoulders, from the way she tied the apron too tight. She took a corner booth on her break, which she almost never did. She just needed to sit where the vinyl was cool, and nobody needed a refill for 4 minutes. And Eli came around the pass, which he did not do. In a year, he had said maybe 40 words to her that weren't about an order. Behind was the line, in front was the floor, and Eli lived behind, always in the 6 feet of steel he kept clean. But he came around, and he had a cup in his hand. He set it down in front of her. Coffee, 2 sugars. No cream. The way she took it. The way she had never once told him she took it, and had never once had to. She looked at the cup. Then, at him. And Eli Ward, who spent words like they were his last dollars, said, "I'll sign it. As your husband. 2 incomes on paper. My file's clean. Covers yours. 4 words about the lease I told you. It was more than 4, in the end. But the 4 that mattered were, I'll sign it. As, the rest was just him showing his work." Tessa's first feeling wasn't the soft one. It was the hard one, the proud one, the one that had gotten her through the low 540s and the coffee can, and the fold-out with the bar under it. Her back went up. She said no. She said it fast. She said, "I'm not going to trap a man into my mess." She said, "It's fraud, Eli. You know that? Signing a paper that says you're something you're not, that's a crime with a name." And Eli let her finish. He was good at letting a person finish. Then he said, "It's a name on a form. You'd still be doing all the raising. I'd just be a name that makes their computer stop blinking red." He looked at the booth where Micah was tracing the last page of the bear book with his finger. "Kid's got 9 days," he said. "Pride's a long argument. He doesn't have time for it." That was the thing that got through. Not the offer. The clock. Pride is a luxury with a due date, and hers had come due. She didn't say yes right there. She said she'd think, which is what a proud person says instead of thank you. But she went home to the motel, and she folded the blanket in 3 over the bar. And she read the last page out loud to the dark after Micah was already gone under, about the bear and the den and the little light on inside. And she thought about a man who knew she took her coffee with 2 sugars and no cream. And she thought, a man who's been paying that much attention for a year isn't doing this because it's easy for him. He's doing it because he already, in some quiet way, decided. She said yes the next morning. Over the flat top, before the doors opened. She said, "Okay, but it's a roof. That's what it is. We're clear on what it is." And Eli said clear, and went back to scraping the grill. They had 4 days to become a marriage. On paper, and enough in the mouth to survive a leasing interview. Because Voss would probe. They both knew it. A single mother with a thin file who shows up 4 days later with a sudden husband and a clean cosigner, that lights every board in the office. So they rehearsed. In the dead hour, over the clean line, quietly, so the pie case hum covered it. He learned things. Her middle name, Anne, that her mother had passed 3 years back, that Micah's birthday was in October, and he wanted, more than anything on this earth, a dog he was never getting in a motel. She learned things too, that Eli had come to Delford 8 years ago, from somewhere he didn't name, that he'd cooked in 3 states, that he liked his eggs almost too hard, and drank his coffee black and hot enough to hurt. She asked him once, careful, why there wasn't a wife, a life, somebody. It was a fair question for 2 people about to say they were married. Eli went still over the grill, just for a second. His hand went, without him telling it, toward the pocket where the wallet was, and stopped and came back to the spatula. "Long time ago," he said. It didn't take. And something in how he said it told her that door had a lock she wasn't going to pick in 4 days. And maybe not in 40, so she left it. You learn not to reach. But she watched, after that. And she saw him do the thing at the doorframe again. The pencil, the little mark at a child's height. Done without thinking. An old hand remembering an old motion. And she filed it away with the laminated thing in the wallet, and the old enough, and the eggs cooked hard. And she thought, there's a whole house inside this man, and every window's got the curtain pulled. She didn't push. She just noticed. Noticing was the thing she was best at. The interview was on a Monday. This is the scene the town would talk about later. Though they didn't know yet they were watching anything. Crestline's leasing office. The plastic chairs, some of them full. The machine of no was always running. There was always somebody waiting to be told about their file. And Tessa in her one good blouse, and Eli in a shirt with a collar that Tessa had never seen, that he must have bought or dug out for this. And it was buttoned to the top like a man going to church or to court. Voss had a folder. Voss had a screen. Voss had that way of addressing the side of your face. And Voss did not believe them for 1 second, and she let them know it with the first question. How long have you 2 been married? And here's where it turned, and I don't think Voss ever understood what turned it. Because Eli didn't hesitate, and he didn't oversell, and he didn't do the thing a liar does, which is offer more than he's asked. He said the date, a real date, one they'd agreed on. And then he did something no rehearsal gave him. He looked at Tessa when he said it. Just a glance. The glance a man gives a woman when the date of their marriage is a good memory. He'd been giving her that glance across a kitchen for a year and never once called it anything. Voss tried again. Harder, where'd you meet? She cleans my line, Eli said. Nobody asked her to. First week she worked there, dead hour. She just started wiping the steel down next to me. I figured a woman who will clean a station that isn't hers is a woman worth knowing. He said it flat, the way he said everything. And it was true, every word, and that's why it landed. He hadn't invented a meet cute. He'd just told her, out loud for the first time, why he'd noticed her. In front of Dana Voss. As cover. Tessa had to look at the folder for a second. Voss probed the money. The 2 incomes, the co-signing, the deposit. Eli answered every number without a wobble, because he'd worked out every number the night before at his own kitchen table, the way he squared the pans. Voss asked what side of the bed Tessa slept on. A trap, a cheap one, and Eli said the side by the window. She likes the sun, and Tessa's own answer, given separately, matched it. Not because they'd rehearsed that one, but because he'd remembered her standing in the east-facing bedroom on the viewing, saying Micah could wake up with the sun. He'd been listening even then, even before there was a reason to. Every trap, he stepped over. Not because he was a good liar, because he wasn't lying about the only thing that mattered, which was that he'd paid this woman a year of quiet attention, and it added up, under pressure, to a man who knew her. Voss signed the lease. She didn't like it. You could see she didn't like it. She signed it the way you concede a point you're sure you're right about. And she said, sliding it across, "Congratulations," flat as a curse. Eli signed under it. His name, clean and steady, next to hers. 2 incomes. A married household. The computer stopped blinking red. They got the keys in a little envelope, and in the parking lot, Tessa took the key out and looked at it, and then she did something that surprised them both. She walked to the truck, and she took the cheap keyring off the visor where Micah had left it, the one with the red bottle cap snapped onto it, and she worked the key onto that ring, right next to the red cap. "For when we have a door," she said out loud, "to nobody, or to the boy who wasn't there, or to the man who was." And Eli Ward looked at that red bottle cap on that keyring, and something moved across his face that he put away fast, the way she folded things, the way he tucked the wallet back. But it moved. I saw it. You would have too. So they moved in, Unit 4B. The end unit. The east-facing window. And I want to slow down here, because this is where a home starts to build itself out of small things, and the small things are the whole story. People think love arrives. It doesn't. It accumulates. It's a pile of tiny, unthanked motions, and one day you look at the pile and you realize what it is. First night, there was almost nothing in the place. A borrowed table. Micah's fold out, moved from the motel, but set up in a room with a door that closed, which he thought was the finest thing that had ever happened to him. He ran the red keychain over the actual lock about 40 times. In, out, in, just to hear the bolt. And Eli cooked. Of course he cooked. He found the one working burner, and he made grilled cheese, because that's what there was, and he made Micah's with one corner burnt. Black, almost, on purpose. And Tessa opened her mouth to say he'd ruined it, and Micah grabbed it and bit straight into the burnt corner first, delighted, because. And Eli somehow knew this. Though Tessa had never told him, the boy loved the burnt corner best. The crunch of it. Some kid logic. Eli had watched Micah eat a grilled cheese at the diner counter once months ago. Watched him turn it to find the darkest edge, and he'd filed it away with everything else he filed, and now he plated it that way without a word, like it was nothing. It became their language, that burnt corner. Understand me. Eli was not a man who could say a soft thing out loud. The wallet had a lock, and so did his mouth. But he could burn one corner of a grilled cheese, and it meant I see him. I see what he likes. I'm paying attention. And Micah would take the plate and go straight for the black edge, every time. And that was the boy saying, "I know you did that for me. Thank you." A whole conversation, and neither of them said a word. That's how the quiet ones love you. They do it with their hands. The front door stuck, swollen in the frame the way old doors get, and you had to shoulder it, and it made a sound like it hurt. Micah couldn't open it himself. He'd throw his whole 40 pounds at it and bounce off. And one Saturday Eli came home from a shift with a hand plane borrowed from the diner's handyman, and he took the door off its hinges in the little concrete yard, and he planed the swollen edge down, slow, in long even strokes, curls of wood falling on the concrete like blonde ribbons. He hung it back. And it swung. Clean, quiet. Micah could open it with one hand. Tessa watched him do it from the window, and she thought, he didn't ask if it bothered me. He just heard the door stick a few times and decided to fix it. That's a degree. She was keeping a ledger she didn't know she was keeping, and that was a degree, ticked up. He asks for nothing. He just fixes the door. And there was the couch. Micah would fall asleep on it in front of the TV, the way kids do, mid-cartoon, mouth open. And Tessa, dead on her feet from a double, would fall asleep beside him, both of them out cold in the blue light. And Eli, coming in last, the way he always came in last, would find them. And he'd take the blanket off the back of the couch and cover the boy. And he'd turn the TV off soft, not with the button that makes the sound, but the slow way. And he'd leave a light on in the kitchen, so if Tessa woke, she wouldn't wake in the dark. And he'd go to his own room. And in the morning, nobody would say anything about it, because that's the rule with the quiet ones. You don't thank them out loud. It embarrasses them. You just let the blanket, in the morning, be the thank you, and the you're welcome both. The town saw them as married now. That was the strangest part, and the part that started, slowly, to stop feeling strange. At the grocery, the checker said, "Tell your husband the special's on again." At Micah's school, because he was in a school now, a real one, with a bus that stopped at a corner that was theirs, the form said parent and guardian, and there were 2 names to write, and she wrote them. The lie had a life of its own now, out in the world, and the lie kept doing kind things for them, and it got harder every day to remember it was supposed to be a lie. And here's where Marcus Hale walked back in. Because a story like this always has a Marcus, and it's important you understand he was not the villain. Marcus was a good man. That's what made him hard. Marcus was a diner regular. 40, solvent, ran a heating and cooling business with his name on the vans. He'd been sweet on Tessa in a slow, decent way for a year, the kind of sweet that buys nothing and waits. And when he heard, because the town heard everything, that Tessa had gotten into Crestline with a husband nobody had known she had, he came in, and he sat at the counter, and he was kind about it, and then, gentle as he could, he laid it out. He said he'd have co-signed, properly, if she'd only asked. 3 times the rent. Easy. His business could carry it. His credit was clean and long. He said there was a nicer unit across town, in a better block, and he could co-sign her into it. Above board, no paper that said anything but the truth. He said it over pie, and he didn't push. And at the end he said the dangerous thing, the true thing. You wouldn't have to carry it alone, Tessa, any of it. And that was real. That was a real offer of a softer life, made by a man who meant every syllable and would have been good to her and good to the boy. Duty, safety, a steady man with his name on his vans. I need you to feel how much easier that was. Because a story where the other choice is a bum is no story at all. The other choice was a good man offering the truth. And the choice she was building was a lie held together with burnt grilled cheese and a plain door. Tessa thanked him. She meant it, and she said she was settled. And Marcus nodded like a gentleman and paid for his pie and left a good tip. And he did not go away, exactly, but he stepped back to wait some more, the way he'd waited a year. He'd wait to see if the lie held. The ledger kept ticking, degree by degree. And then came the night that melted a whole column of it at once. Micah spiked a fever at 2 in the morning. The bad kind. The kind where you put your lips to a small forehead and it's wrong, it's furnace wrong, and the boy's eyes are glassy and he's saying words that aren't in order. Tessa came apart for about 4 seconds, which is all the coming apart a mother gets to do, and then she was moving. And Eli was already up. He slept light, the way people sleep when they've learned that the worst things come at night. He had the truck keys before she'd finished the sentence. He carried Micah out to the truck wrapped in the couch blanket, carried him like the boy weighed nothing, like he'd carried a child before, and his arms remembered the shape. He drove. Steady. Not fast enough to scare, fast enough to matter. And in the urgent care waiting room, under those lights that make everyone look like they're already grieving, he sat. He didn't pace. He didn't fill the air. He just sat, a still point, while Tessa signed the forms with a shaking hand. There was a copay. Of course there was. There's always a number, even at 2 in the morning, even with a burning child on your lap. And Tessa's hand went to her bag, to the envelope, to the thin fold of 1s and 5s that was supposed to be next week, and Eli was already at the window. He'd already paid it. From his own envelope, his own thin fold. And when she started to speak, to protest, to make it a thing, he just shook his head, once, small, and sat back down. Not a thing. Don't make it a thing. It was a virus. It broke by morning. Micah was fine, was asking for a burnt grilled cheese by noon, the way kids scare the life out of you and then want a snack. But something happened in that waiting room that didn't break with the fever. Because at one point in the worst of it, Tessa had said his name. Not Eli. The way you say the name of the cook you work with. She'd said it the other way. The soft way. The way you only get to say a name when it's a name you've started to lean on. Eli, just that. Meaning don't leave. And I can't do this alone. And I'm so glad you're here. All folded into 2 syllables. And he'd heard the register change. Of course he had. He heard everything. And he'd looked at her, and he hadn't said anything. Because he never said anything. But he'd moved his chair an inch closer. An inch. That was Eli Ward's whole heart, right there, moving 1 inch across a waiting room floor. A degree melted. Visibly, she'd have denied it if you'd asked her the next day, standing in her kitchen, married on paper to a man who was still, technically, an arrangement. But it melted, and they both knew. And neither of them said. And that not saying was becoming the loudest thing in the house, which is exactly when Marcus made his real offer. The clean one. The escape hatch. He caught her at the diner. A slow Tuesday. And he wasn't unkind. He was never unkind. But he'd heard something in the town. A hum, a worry, about Crestline and audits and paper. And he was a man who understood contracts and risk. And he laid it down plain. He said the marriage on that lease isn't real. He knew it. He was sure of it. And he wasn't judging, but he was scared for her. He said if Crestline ever looked close, if they ever asked for a certificate she couldn't produce, it wasn't just a lost apartment. It was fraud. A word with a jail attached. A record. For a mother. He said, you've got a boy to protect, and you're standing on a lie that could take him from you if it cracks. And then the hatch. Come to the unit across town, he said. I'll co-sign it, all legal, all true. You walk away from 4B and the risk clean. No lie, no exposure. A good address and a man who'll never let the paper be false, because there won't be any paper to be false. He put it on the table like a set of keys. A whole safe life, held out in one honest hand. You don't have to keep being married to a cook you're not married to, he said, gentle, just to keep a roof. Let me give you a roof that can't be taken. And it was the smart choice. Understand that. Everything Marcus said was true. The lie was a fault line, and she was building her whole life on top of it. And here was a good man offering solid ground for free. Tessa went home to 4B that night, and she stood in the kitchen. The door didn't stick anymore. There was a light left on for her, the way there was every night now. So she never came home to the dark. Micah was asleep on the couch under the couch blanket, covered, the TV off soft. And on the counter, cooling on a plate, was half a grilled cheese Eli had made her and left out. And one corner of it was burnt, black, on purpose, because that was the shape their kindness had. That was the only alphabet the quiet man had for the word love. She thought about the nicer unit across town, the honest paper, the safe man with his name on his vans. And she thought about how, if she took it, she'd have to explain to Micah why they were leaving the door that finally opened, and why the man who fixed it wouldn't be coming. She'd made her decision before she finished the thought. She'd probably made it in the waiting room when a chair moved 1 inch, but her hands did it for her. She had Marcus's offer written on a card in her apron pocket, the address and the number, everything solid and true and safe. She took it out. She looked at it. And she tore it. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just. Done. 2 pieces. Then 4. And into the trash under the sink. Not because she'd let herself say the word love yet. She hadn't. She was still too proud and too scared and too burned to say it. She tore it up because she'd figured out something simpler and more dangerous. This arrangement had stopped feeling like an arrangement. This lie had quietly, one burnt corner at a time, become a home. And you don't trade a home for a safer address. You just don't. Not if you've spent your whole life on other people's paper, folding blankets over a bar so your boy won't feel it. You don't leave the first place that fits. She committed to the lie because it had stopped being a lie in every way that a form couldn't measure. And I truly wish, I could tell you that was the hard part behind them, that she tore up the card and the roof held, and the story got soft and easy from there. But 2 towns over, in a Crestline regional office, a compliance system was running its quarterly review, and a routine occupancy flag had lit up next to Unit 4B. A little line of text, cold as the walk-in. Married household, certificate on file, and a cursor, blinking, next to a box that was empty. They didn't have a certificate. They had a burnt grilled cheese, and a plain door, and a keyring with a red bottle cap, and a whole home built on a name Eli Ward had signed to make a computer stop blinking red. And that computer had just started blinking again. A letter came 4 days later. It was thin. That was the first cruel thing about it. Bad news should be heavy. This was 1 sheet, folded in 3, in an envelope with the Crestline logo in the corner. And Tessa found it in the mailbox at 4B with a grocery flyer and a coupon for tires. She read it standing on the walk. The door of 4B was open behind her. Inside, Micah was on the floor with his socks off, driving a toy truck along the seam of the rug. And Eli was at the stove doing something with onions that made the whole apartment smell like a place people lived. She read it twice. The words were polite. That was the second cruel thing. Nobody threatens you in plain language anymore. They use words like review and verification and documentation. Our records indicate a married household. Please provide a copy of your marriage certificate within 30 days to complete your file. Failure to provide requested documentation may result in a review of your tenancy. 30 days. She folded it back along its own creases. She did that carefully, the way you handle something you might have to pretend you never got. Tess? Eli said from the stove. He didn't turn around. He'd learned the sound of her not coming in. Cold out there. She came in. She closed the door. It didn't stick anymore. He'd seen to that weeks ago. The little hand plane borrowed from the diner, curls of wood on the mat, and it shut with a soft, true sound that used to make her happy, and right now just made her want to cry. She put the letter on the counter next to the stove, where he could see it without her having to say anything. He wiped his hands on the towel over his shoulder. He read it the way he read everything. Once, slow, all the way to the bottom. His face didn't change. That was one of the things about Eli. His face almost never changed. But she'd been living 6 feet from him for months now, and she'd learned to read the small stuff. The way his jaw set. The way he put the towel down instead of keeping it in his hand. 30 days, he said. 30 days. Micah looked up from his truck. Are we in trouble? No, baby, Tessa said. Fast. Too fast. Grown-up male. Boring, Micah went back to his truck. 6-year-olds take you at your word when they want to. She was grateful for that and ashamed of it both. Eli picked the letter up again. He tapped the corner of it against the counter once, thinking, "This is a form," he said. "This is a computer." It flagged a box. That's all this is right now. That's all it is until it isn't. Until it isn't, he agreed. He wasn't going to lie to her. He never had. That was the strange, upside-down honesty of the whole thing. The one lie they'd built together sat on a foundation of a man who wouldn't tell her a comfortable untruth to save his own skin. We knew the box was empty when I signed it. I know, so we deal with the box. But dealing with the box meant a certificate they didn't have, from a wedding that never happened, for a marriage that existed only in a leasing office, and, if she was honest, only in the way he set her coffee down. 2 sugars, no cream. Every shift, without being asked, for over a year now, long before any of this. She hadn't let herself think too hard about how long he'd been getting it right. That night she couldn't sleep. She got up and stood in the little kitchen in the dark. The coffee can was up in the cabinet above the sink. She'd carried it from the motel. Some habit she couldn't break, the emergency money in 1s and 5s rubber banded inside. She took it down. She didn't open it. She just held it, cold aluminum. And she thought about the numbers. Rent, $1,285 a month. Her tips were good, but her hours weren't guaranteed. She heard the fridge hum. She heard Micah turn over on the couch. He still liked the couch. The fold-out was for company he didn't have, and she heard, from behind the bedroom door, the sound of Eli not sleeping either. They didn't talk about it that night. They just both didn't sleep, in separate rooms, in a home a computer had decided to look at twice. The rent crunch came before they'd solved the letter. It always works like that. Trouble doesn't line up and take a number. The Blue Kettle cut Eli's hours. New owner group 2 towns over. The kind that runs the numbers and decides a Tuesday doesn't need a second cook. He came home on a Wednesday and told her flat. The way he told her everything. They cut me to 4 days, starting next week. They sat at the kitchen table that night after Micah was down, and they did the thing she swore she'd never do in front of another adult again as long as she lived. They put the money on the table. Her tips, folded from her apron, 1s and 5s and the occasional creased 10, held together with a soft rubber band. His envelope, thin, from the diner. They counted it out in stacks on the formica, under the one overhead light. 2 grown people moving small bills around like a puzzle that didn't want to be solved. It was the same as the deposit. It was exactly the same as the deposit she'd counted on the diner counter the day this all started, when Dana Voss slid $2,570 back across a desk without touching it, like the money might be catching. 1s and 5s. Her whole worth in 1s and 5s. Except this time there were 2 sets of hands on the table. That was the whole difference. That was everything. We're short, she said, for next month. About 90 if my Thursdays hold. More if they don't. Eli didn't reach for his own envelope and play hero. She'd have hated that, and he knew it. Instead, he slid his stack to the middle, next to hers, so they made one pile. And he said, "Then we're short. Together, that's a different kind of short." She looked at the 2 stacks becoming one, and something in her chest that had been clenched for 8 years, since the boy's father walked out and left her holding a newborn and a lease she couldn't cover, something in there loosened a single notch. Not all the way. She didn't trust all the way, but 1 notch. "You could have just paid it," she said. You don't have Micah. You don't have my Thursdays to worry about. You could cover $90 and not think about it." "I could," he said. "And then it'd be my apartment you and Micah live in." "That's not what this is." "What is this, Eli?" She hadn't meant to ask it. It came out of the tiredness and the 1s and 5s and the late hour. And the second it was in the air, she wished she could take it back. because it wasn't a question about rent anymore and they both knew it. He was quiet a long moment. The fridge hummed. Down the block, a dog gave up on something. "It's the two of us keeping a roof over your boy," he said finally. Careful. Every word set down like a plate on a line. That's what it is. That's what it's been. It wasn't an answer to what she'd asked. She let him not answer. She was a coward about it too that night. They were both still folding blankets over the bar so nobody would feel the shape underneath. Marcus Hale came into the diner that Friday and made it harder, the way good men sometimes do just by being good. He took his usual booth. He was 40, ran a heating and cooling business that actually made money, and he tipped like a man who remembered being broke. He'd offered once already, weeks back, a real cosign. His clean name on a nicer unit. No computer able to touch it. Everything solid and legal and safe. She'd torn that card up. He didn't know that. He'd been decent enough to not push. Friday he pushed, gently, because he'd heard about the hours. Small town. Everybody hears. "I'm not going to be a pest about it," he said when she brought his coffee. "But you look tired, Tessa. More than the usual tired." He turned his cup a quarter turn on the saucer. A nervous thing. "The offer stands. All of it. A cosign, a better place, and I'd like to take you and the boy to dinner. That part's separate, but it stands too." He was kind. That was the unbearable thing. He wasn't a villain, and he never would be. He meant every word, and he'd have been good to Micah, and he'd never once have made her count ones and fives on a table. "You're a good man, Marcus," she said. And she meant it, which is why it came out sounding like an ending. He heard it. He was smart enough to hear it. He nodded slowly and looked down into his coffee. "There's somebody already," he said, not a question. She glanced, without meaning to, toward the pass, where Eli was plating a burger with his back to them, apron strings crossed and tied, doing the only thing he knew how to do to be useful without being seen. "I don't know what there is," she said honestly. "I know it's not something I can trade." Marcus followed her glance. He was quiet. Then he did the thing that told her exactly what kind of man she was turning down. He smiled, a real one, a little sad, and he said, "Well, when a woman won't trade a thing, that usually means it's worth keeping." He left a bigger tip than the coffee deserved, and he didn't push again. The inspection notice came the next week. Crestline, again, A scheduled in unit occupancy verification. An inspector would visit 4B to confirm the household matched the lease. Married household, 2 adults, 1 minor. They'd send someone. They had a date and a time and 11 days to become, on the visible surface of their lives, a thing they'd never technically been. "It's a walk-through," Eli said, reading it at the counter. "They look at the rooms. They ask a few questions. It's not a court. They'll ask a few questions. So we answer them. Like we did the first time." He set the notice down. "We were good at it the first time." They had been. She remembered the signing interview, months ago now, Dana Voss across the desk with her lanyard and her cold little smile, probing, sure the sudden husband was a fake, and Eli answering every trap she laid without a flicker, because he hadn't had to lie. Voss asked how Tessa took her coffee, and Eli said 2 sugars, no cream, before Tessa's mouth was even open. Voss asked what the boy's favorite food was, and Eli said grilled cheese. And then, this was the part that undid her. Months later, still, he added, the burnt corner. He likes the burnt corner, and the leasing manager wrote it down as proof of a marriage, when it was really just proof that one man had been paying attention to them for a year while everyone else looked through them. They'd passed. The town had believed them ever since. She was Mrs. Ward at the pharmacy and at Micah's school, and nobody blinked. But a walk-through was different. A walk-through was their home under a stranger's eyes. And the trouble with their home was that it was real in every way that a form couldn't measure, and fake in the one way a form could. The week before the inspection, they built the evidence of a marriage that was, and wasn't, and was. It felt insane doing it, because most of it was already true. Eli's razor by the sink, already there. His 2 work shirts in the bedroom closet, already there. The pencil mark on the kitchen doorframe at Micah's height, Eli had made that weeks ago, without a word. The same as he'd once made one on the diner doorframe, an old habit no one noticed. She'd noticed. She'd said nothing. But some of it they staged, a framed photo they didn't have. So Eli walked to the drugstore and printed one, the 3 of them at the diner one slow Sunday, Micah between them with ketchup on his chin, somebody's phone catching it by accident. And he bought a $2 frame and put it on the shelf, and there it was, the family, in a frame, true and staged at once. Tessa stood looking at that photo for a long time. "We look like a family," she said. "We keep a boy fed and warm and read to at night," Eli said, wiping the counter that didn't need wiping. "I don't know what else a family is." The inspection was on a Tuesday, 10 in the morning. The inspector was a young man with a clipboard and a lanyard and no interest in ruining anyone's day, just a man doing a route. He walked the rooms. He noted the beds. He asked Micah, kneeling down friendly, "Who lives here with you, buddy?" And Micah, 6 years old, holding the red bottle cap keyring he'd made in a diner booth for when they had a door. Micah said, "My mom and Eli. And me. Not Mr. Eli. Just Eli. The way you say a person who's simply part of the house." The inspector wrote something. He didn't blink. Kids say things their own way. He finished his route, thanked them, and left. They passed the walk-through. But the walk-through was never the real danger, and they both knew it as the door clicked shut. Somewhere 2 towns over, a box was still empty, and a 30-day clock had turned into a review. And a review, in the language of Crestline residential, was a polite word for a machine deciding whether a family got to keep its floor. The real letter came 10 days later. And it wasn't thin. It was thick. A packet. And the word on it was the word Eli had refused to say out loud all these weeks. The one he'd been holding off with plain doors and pooled wages and a $2 frame. Fraud, not in that word exactly. Crestline was too careful for that word. The packet said misrepresentation on a rental application and material omission, and it said the lease was subject to being voided, and, down at the bottom, in the flat, cold language of a company protecting itself, it said the matter may be referred for further action. Falsified application. A marriage certificate that didn't exist because a marriage didn't exist. His name, Eli Ward, signed to a box to make a computer stop blinking red, now the thing that could end them. Tessa read it at the table, with her hands flat on the wood to keep them still. Micah was at school. It was just the 2 of them, and the packet in the fridge humming its stupid ordinary hum. "They can void the lease," she said. Her voice came out strange. "They can. It says referred." "Eli, referred means, I know what it means. You signed it. Your name's on it. If they refer this, it's your..." She stopped. She'd spent her whole life carrying her own weight, so nobody could ever say she'd made someone else carry it. And here was a man who'd carried a piece of hers. And now, the piece could crush him. Eli stood up from the table. He walked to the window. He stood with his back to her, the way he stood at the pass, and for a while, he didn't say anything at all. Then he took out his wallet. She'd seen that wallet 100 times. Cheap, laminated something soft at the corners, worn to a shine. He kept it in his back pocket, and he never opened the deep fold, and once, months ago when Micah tried to look, Eli had closed it. Gentle, but final, and changed the subject. He opened the deep fold now. He took out a photo. Laminated, soft at the corners from years of a thumb passing over it. He put it on the table in front of her, face up, and he sat back down, and he put his hands in his lap like a man giving something up. It was a woman, young, laughing at whoever held the camera, and a boy, small, maybe 4, maybe 5, on her hip. one shoe off. The colors were a little faded the way a picture gets when it's carried against a body for a long time. "That's Anna," Eli said. "And that's Sam." Tessa didn't touch it. She looked at it and she felt the floor of the whole story shift under her. All of it. Months of it. Rearranging, 8 years ago, he said. There was a fire. In the building we rented. Bad wiring the landlord knew about and never fixed. I was on a night shift. He said it evenly, the way you can only say a thing after you've said it to yourself 10,000 times in the dark. I got the call at the pass. I was plating an order when the phone rang. I put the plate up before I answered it. Isn't that a thing? I put the plate up first. Sam was 6. He looked at the doorframe. At the pencil mark at Micah's height. He'd have been 6 that spring. I marked the doorframes. I don't even decide to. My hand does it. It's the height he was. He breathed. The grilled cheese with the burnt corner. That was his. He liked the burnt corner. I make it for Micah, and half the time I forget it's not. I forget for a second. And there it was. All of it. The whole architecture of the man laid bare on a Formica table. The coffee he never had to be told. The blanket over a sleeping boy. The door he couldn't stand to see stick. The pencil marks. The burnt corner. Not a stranger being kind. A father who'd buried his own family. Moving through her life doing the only rituals his hands still remembered. On a boy who wasn't his, and a woman he'd never let himself want, because he believed, she could see now that he believed it all the way down, that he wasn't allowed the real thing anymore. I came to Delford after, he said. Cooked in 3 states before that. Kept moving. Figured if I didn't belong anywhere, didn't sign anything, didn't let anybody count on me, then I couldn't. He stopped. He looked at the packet. And then I signed your lease. I put my name on a family again. And now look. This isn't the fire, Eli. It's the same shape. His voice cracked, once, the only time she ever heard it do that. I put my name where a family was, and now there's a letter that can take the roof. It's the same shape. I bring this down on people. I don't mean to. I bring it. He stood. He got his bag from the closet, the single bag, the one he'd moved in with, that told her he'd always kept himself packable. I'll go to Crestline, he said. I'll tell them the truth. That I lied on the application. That you didn't know the box was a problem. That I put you up to it. I'll take it clean. All of it. So your record stays yours, and Micah's stays his. You'll lose the unit, but you won't have a referral on your name. I've got no boy to protect. I've got nothing they can stop. He stopped. He stood there with the bag, a big, careful man made small, ready to walk out the plane door into the cold and take the whole weight alone. Because taking the whole weight alone was the only way he'd let himself love anybody in 8 years. Tessa stood up. She picked the photo up off the table. Anna laughing. Sam with one shoe off. She held it, and she saw that his eyes went to it fast and scared, the way you watch a stranger hold the last of something. She didn't hand it back like it might break. She held it like it was precious and ordinary both, like a picture of people who'd been loved. And she stepped close to him, closer than the arrangement had ever let them stand. And she put it back in his hand, and she folded his fingers over it. They were yours, she said. They still are. Nobody's asking you to stop carrying them. She kept her hand over his fist. But you listen to me, Eli Ward. Anna didn't burn because you signed a lease. Sam didn't die because your name was on a paper. A landlord who wouldn't fix the wiring killed them. Not your name. Not you. Her own voice was going now, but she held it. You've spent 8 years thinking the safe thing was to never belong to anybody, so you couldn't lose them. And instead you've just been dying slow the whole time, a little every year, to keep a promise the dead never asked you for. He was breathing hard. The bag slipped an inch on his shoulder. The dead don't need you to keep dying with them, she said. Sam doesn't need you to be alone. He needs you to make some other kid a grilled cheese with a burnt corner and mean it all the way through. She was crying now and not hiding it, which for Tessa Boyd was its own kind of miracle. Micah's asleep on that couch every night warmer than he's ever been. That's not you bringing anything down. That's you holding something up. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he put the bag down. He didn't say a speech. He wasn't a man of speeches. He put the bag down and he put the photo back in the deep fold of his wallet. Gentle. Final. But different this time. Not hiding it. Just keeping it. And he looked at her, at the whole wreck of her face, and he said the truest 4 words he had. I'll fight it. Then, they fought it the honest way. That's the part nobody tells you about. That the honest way is slower and uglier, and less like a movie than the running away way. But they fought it. A tenant advocate. Tessa found her through a legal aid line, a woman named Reyes, who worked out of an office with a broken blind, and a full waiting room, and no time, and gave them her time anyway. Reyes read the packet. Reyes read the lease. And then Reyes read 11 months of Tessa's records, because Tessa Boyd, who trusted nobody and asked for nothing, had kept every single receipt. 14 months of rent, the last 11 at 4B, every dollar on time. Money orders, printed and dated. Not one late, not one partial, not once. Through cut hours and pooled wages and a fever night and a rent-short month they'd made up out of the coffee can. This is the case, Reyes said, tapping the ledger. Right here. They want to void your lease over a missing certificate. But look what they're actually doing. She pulled Crestline's own application requirements out of the packet. A co-signer earning 3 times the rent, or a 2-income married household. You know how many single mothers earn 3 times the rent on 1 income? Almost none. You know who this rule keeps out? She looked at Tessa over the broken blind. It keeps out you. Every one of you. That's a fair housing problem, and Crestline's lawyers know it's a fair housing problem. And they do not want a regional office made an example of over-screening out single moms. So what do? Eli asked. We don't beg, Reyes said. We put 11 months of perfect payment and a screening pattern on the table, and we let them do the math on what a complaint costs them versus what a certificate is worth. She almost smiled. Turns out, the system does lease to maybes, when the maybes got receipts and a lawyer. The meeting was at the Crestline regional office. The same brand of carpet, the same recessed lights, the same cold that Tessa remembered from the day Dana Voss slid her deposit back untouched. And Dana Voss was there. Regional now, or as good as. Lanyard, folded arms. The little smile she wore like a badge. Reyes laid it out on the desk. The ledger first. 14 months, 11 at 4B. Every payment on time, printed clean. Then the screening requirements next to it. Then, quietly, a single sheet that Reyes called our fair housing analysis and slid across last, face up, so Voss could read the word disparate impact right side up. Voss read it. Her arms stayed folded. Her smile did a thing smiles do when they're being held up on purpose. The application was falsified, Voss said. There is no marriage certificate because there is no marriage. That's fraud, Miss Reyes. I don't care how many money orders you print. There's no certificate, Reyes agreed. Easy. There's also no requirement you can lawfully enforce for one once we're looking at how your married household preference filters your applicant pool. You want to litigate the certificate? Fine. We'll litigate the pattern next to it. Your regional counsel can decide which of those 2 conversations they'd rather have on the record. The room went quiet. Tessa watched Dana Voss do the math. She watched the woman who told her, in a leasing office full of waiting applicants, no husband, no history, no home. She watched that woman run the cost of a fair housing complaint against the cost of 1 empty box, and lose, and know she'd lost, and hate it. Voss unfolded her arms. She pulled the reinstatement toward her. She uncapped a pen with a small, hard click. The lease is reinstated, she said. To the paper, not to them. The certificate requirement is waived on this file. As a courtesy. As a correction, Reyes said pleasantly. Voss signed. She turned the page around and pushed the corrected lease across the desk. the same motion she'd once used to push back a deposit in 1s and 5s, except this time the paper was coming toward them. Eli reached out and stopped it with 2 fingers. He didn't pick it up right away. He looked at the top of it, where the household names were printed. Tessa Boyd, Eli Ward. He turned it a half inch so it faced Voss again. "Read the name again," he said. "Quiet, not cruel. Just true. It's real now." Voss didn't answer. There wasn't anything to answer. Tessa took the pen out of her hand. She didn't say a word. She'd promised herself she wouldn't give this woman one. She just signed. In her own name, on her own lease, on her own home, and set the pen down. 2 pairs of hands had built the thing. It only took one to sign it, now that it was real. He proposed for real at the Blue Kettle. Closing time. The same booths, the same regulars, the trucker who always wanted his eggs wrecked, the 2 old men who split a check to the penny. The woman who'd been there the day Tessa counted her deposit on the counter and watched it come back. The same witnesses who'd seen her humbled. Eli had his apron on. He'd cooked the last order of the night. And he came out from the pass, which he never did, and he set a coffee down in front of Tessa on the counter. 2 sugars, no cream. The way he'd been telling her the truth for 2 years without either of them calling it that. Then he took the little box out of his apron pocket. Nothing fancy, a plain band, a line cook's ring, bought honest, and he set it down next to the coffee, and he said 4 words. Not the 4 words from the beginning of all this, the ones about a lease. Different 4 words. Marry me, for real. The diner went still. The trucker put his fork down. And before Tessa could get her voice to work, a small shape came barreling out from the corner booth where he'd been coloring. Micah, 6 years old, who'd made a keyring out of a red bottle cap for when they had a door, and he ran the keychain up onto the counter and set it down next to the ring like he was adding his own vote to the record. The key was on it now. A real key. The key to 4B. "We already have a door," Micah said, like they were all being slow. Tessa laughed and it broke in the middle and became the other thing, and she said yes with her hand over her mouth. And the diner, the whole tired closing time diner full of people who'd watched a leasing manager slide her worth back across a counter. The whole place stood up and made the kind of noise a small town makes when it decides, out loud, that 2 of its own get to keep something. Marcus Hale was in the last booth. He'd come in late, for pie, and he'd seen the whole thing. He stood up when the noise died down. He put money on his table, enough for the pie and enough more that it was clearly for something else. He came over, and he shook Eli's hand. Firm, a man's real handshake, and he said, "You take care of them." Not a threat, a blessing. Then to Tessa, with that same sad, decent smile from the booth weeks ago I told you. Worth keeping. He left a card on the counter. His number, his business, kind, in case a furnace ever quit in the cold. And he paid his tab, and he bowed out the way good men do who mean well and don't win. He got a home for someone else. Someday, not this one. He knew it, and he went gracefully. 6 months on, the light comes into 4B from the east in the mornings. Tessa stood in that bedroom once, back at the start, when it was just an empty unit she couldn't have, and she'd thought, without telling anyone, it seemed too soft to say, that a boy could wake up with sun on the wall in a room like this. He does now. Micah wakes up with sun on the wall. The front door swings clean. It hasn't stuck in months. Eli keeps the little plane in a drawer, and he takes it out twice a year, unasked, and shaves the swelling down before it can start. Because he's a man who fixes a thing before it becomes a problem, having learned the hard way what happens when somebody doesn't. On the kitchen doorframe, there's a pencil mark at the height of Micah's crown. There's a second one an inch above the first, 6 months of a growing boy. Eli made both. His hand still does it without deciding. But it's a different thing now than it was. It used to be a wound he pressed on to keep it open. Now it's just a father marking how tall his kid is getting. The photo of Anna and Sam is out of the deep fold of the wallet these days. It's on the shelf, in a frame, next to the drugstore photo of the three of them. Both families in the same room. Nobody hidden. Micah knows their names. He says them easy, the way kids say the names of people who are simply part of the house. On Sundays, there's a grilled cheese with one burnt corner on a plate. Micah still won't eat it any other way. Eli still makes it. And once in a while, flipping it, he gets a look on his face that's two things at once. And Tessa lets him have it. And doesn't ask. Because she knows both of the boys it's for. The red bottle cap keyring hangs by the door. It holds a real key now. The key opens a real door that opens on a real home. And the boy who made it, back when they had nothing but a motel room and 9 days, was right all along. It was for when they had a door. On the fridge there are 2 pieces of paper. One is a form letter from Crestline Residential, Regional Office, notifying the household of the reinstatement of the lease as a courtesy. It's magneted up crooked, and nobody's ever read the whole thing. It's just there, the way you keep the thing you beat, to remember you beat it. In front of it, half covering it, is a drawing. Crayon. 3 stick figures holding hands outside a square house, with a triangle roof, and a sun in the corner, with lines coming off it. Underneath, in the careful, uneven letters of a 6-year-old, it says the 3 of us. The letter is behind the drawing. That's the right order. A form decides a lot of things in this world. It decides who gets a key, and who counts as a household, and whose 1s and 5s are good enough. But it doesn't decide what a home is. It never did. A home isn't approved. A home gets built, slow, 1 burnt corner at a time, by 2 pairs of hands that decide to stay. The door that used to stick closes soft behind them now, and on the other side of it, the light comes in from the east. On a wall, on a sleeping boy, in a place that is finally, lawfully, and in every way a form can't measure, theirs, wherever you're watching this from tonight, comment your city. I'd like to know how far this one traveled.